Scramble the fighters and get them into the air. We're defending our homeworld in the beginning of the Brush War campaign, set in 3105. Late in 3105, the tension between the TRC and the Duchy grew to a flashpoint as they could not resolve their differences over the planet of Loe.
Only minor opposition was encountered in what was otherwise a peaceful consolidation of governing bodies for Loe. We were happy to announce that Loe is now happily following the benevolent rule of His Grace, Duke Krakor.
And on the distant world of Westover, a fringe society element has claimed Ennis, the capital, and the rest of the planet for their own, while the Knights have landed on the planet as well, claiming it for themselves.
In a surprise move, the BLNR has begun landings on the TRC homeworld. The landings have so far gone uncontested as the TRC continues to withdraw their embattled forces from the Duchy over the distant land of Loe.
We roundly condemn the Knights for their imperial assault on our good friends in Westover. We call for interfactional censure of their heinous misappropriation of local resources for non-science ends. The Knights should withdraw and pay reparations to the kindly citizens of Westover immediately.
Casualties continue to mount for the third week in the capital of Ennis, as the Knights' 101st Irregulars continue to attempt to dislodge the beleaguered Alpha Cluster of the Society. Despite heavy shelling and extensive collateral damage, they refuse to budge to the encroaching attackers.
Scramble, scramble, scramble. I've got a couple heavy hitters followed up with some escorts. I found that numbers play a big role in an aerospace game, and facing off against our valiant defenders is the TRC, the newfound lackey of the BLNR, as they vanguard a massive invasion of the homeworld. Already, several landing sites have occurred across the homeworld of Carnot, and there is really nothing we can do about it. All we have sitting at home in the capital is just a reserve guard and 2 militia units that are desperately scrambling to form so that they can push off the vile invaders. In this relatively large campaign, the Muriel Fusiliers have so far peacefully expanded, leading their people through the Jihad peacefully, and have expanded out to a couple nearby worlds. But this has not gone unnoticed by the people of the Bigby's Late Night Raiders, another mercenary company that has turned relatively evil and has enslaved the TRC into doing their bidding. It became very clear early on, within the first few turns, the first few months, that this was going to be a problem. As the cards were put on the table, it became clear that an invasion was imminent. In this scenario, we're going to use card initiative to keep everything all in order, and we're also using a term that we use locally called mobile war, where the slowest unit has to set up on the first full hex of their respective side of the map, and then you alternate with your opponent, moving up the movement bands until you get to the fastest units. I put my Shivas down first because at 5'8" they're the slowest. Then he responds with his Chippewa, which was also pretty slow, and the Reaver responded in kind on the other side of the board. He puts his Lightnings, I do believe, on the middle top in a position which can go north or south. He gives a Saber Escort to his Chippewa and puts another Saber Escort up there with his Lightnings, while I put all the Interceptors going all in on the middle side of the board. I push forward with the Reaver. I evade with him because in the first few rounds we're not really going to take a whole lot of shots at each other, or at least I cannot guarantee anything. I lost the initiative on that, so I need to at least be careful that he's going to get overrun by something. He responds, he begins moving some of his interceptors or heavier fighters in the north end of the board towards the Reaver flying over that lake bed, while the Chippewa goes ahead and counts out his hexes and tries to figure out what's the proper engagement range between the two heavy hitters on the board. But the angled deployment of the Shivas becomes immediately apparent as I shift south as I move to the middle of the board, completely ignoring the fact that there's a northern side of the board, and I take those Shivas and I put them in a position so that they can start hammering away at long distance, because we are going to get the most out of those heavy fighters as just kind of an assault platform. Seydlitz rushes up the center of the board, presents an interesting target to any of his fighters that might want to take it on. Shade is again forced, because the initiative cards are screwing me, to move up. Again, I open up another flank on the northern side, so he has something to think about, but he does not buy it. The Lightnings and the Sabers begin jockeying along the center of the board, but they do not commit themselves to anything. Escort Saber for the Chippewa turns and engages the Seydlitz in a head-on pass. However, my gambit is now starting to come into play as the two Shades escort each other, moving on the northern end of the map. I do have the last initiative tick, and I let the Seydlitz loose, dumping the afterburners, and I try to figure out a way to put him into the back lines on the first turn, but there's no really way to do it. I completely overestimated the speed of the Seydlitz, and I start counting out and trying to figure out where to place him. So I go with the best. I jink and I send him as far back into the aft corner of his deployment area so that he has something to think about for the next turn. Shooting and maneuvering is incredibly important in an aerospace game. Often I've found that some of these engagements are won in the first salvoed pass, and then you're just left with whoever survives jockeying around. So it's always very important to try to commit your opponent, because there's nothing to hide behind. You need to get on his rear arc and get those mods low, but that's where things are dangerous in aerospace matches, because the mods are typically pretty low to start with. This is the only time in which buying a better gunnery pilot actually doesn't always pay off, because a lot of the 2-hit mobs are usually sitting around 4 or 5 plus anyway. So buying a really elite pilot, especially for my brother here, the TRC are putting down some really hyper elite pilots and are usually hitting on 1s and 3s. It's not bad, but he really needs to make those pilots earn their way back. And the Saber is no match for the Seydlitz as it opens up with all its medium lasers, puts a couple holes in the Seydlitz, but the Seydlitz pilot is going to shrug it off. We got some screen doors at home, and this is the home world. We need to defend it. If we lose the air war here, we are going to be fighting with one hell of a bucket on one of our feet when we do the ground war later on, as the Big B's Late Night Raiders decides to take their grudge match to our capital, the only place on our planet that we have successfully contained. It's the beginning of turn 2, and though not a whole lot has died, this is still incredibly lethal as we are closing the engagement ranges between the units. This is the time in which the two squadrons will emerge victorious or head home with smoke between their tailpipes, because this is the turn that usually depends on whether or not you're going to be doing a slug match or if it's going to be a whole lot of turn and burn. The TRC sends its Saber swinging wide, trying to get an angle on those Shivas, but they have not moved yet. I go ahead and move them. Much like an assault mech in a normal game, it's good to get them out of the way first because they are the least useful. But again, positioning and maneuvering is a whole lot more important in an aerospace game. Again, cards kind of screw me. So the Reaver moves forward. There's not a whole lot I can do for it. I go ahead and try to get up right into the Chippewa's face, and I try to jink in such a way that he's not going to be able to maneuver in on it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the board, the Shades have been swinging into their prey, trying to take on the Sabers to try to even up the odds before the Lightnings move their way in and start taking on perhaps the Shivas or try to jink in one way or the other. Whichever way he goes is going to determine a lot on where the Interceptors are going to have to be able to struggle to match. Sabers, again, are in a turn and burn match against the Shades, and they are pulling some impressive Gs, just like the Chippewa manages to pull in a special maneuver and pulls right behind the Reaver. I was not expecting him to be able to do that, and that is kind of a faux pas. The Shiva turns, seeing his buddy in trouble, moves over there as fast as he can, exposes himself, and lets the Lightning get in on his left quarter. Again, we've got teamwork going on. So the Shade sees what's going on. Lightning is engaging the Shiva that should be trying to escort him, or at least shooting down the Lightning, and moves in to try to protect his buddy's flank. And in a maneuver that is reminiscent of some World War II dogfights, turn and burn gunfights happening as the planes are circling in on each other, one after another, trying to take each other on. As the Lightning turns in to take on the Shiva, the Shade turns in to take on the Lightning, and escort Lightning for the first. His wingman swings in to take on the Shade, while the Sadelets, once preoccupied with helping out his buddy the Reaver, swings around and takes on the Lightning in the rear. We've got a chain of units all firing up each other's tailpipes. Except for the Shiva. It's a side shot, which is a little better. Chippewa opens up with his guns and starts lighting up the Reaver. He puts a couple rounds into the tailpipe, manages to tag the fuel tanks. It does not explode. The Reaver pilot prays to whatever god he happens to favor that day and begins immediately throttling the engine down and starts heading back home while the Chippewa still breathes down his neck. And before the Chippewa can make do on his recently wounded quarry, the Shiva opens up at long range, opening up the engine on that thing from way out far. Oh, you gotta love the Shiva. I love it when it's in an aerial platform because those large pulse lasers just are sweet at ripping up other fighters, giving the Reaver a perfectly clear run back to his side of the board. Lightning on the Shiva opens up on it, manages to tag the armor quite a bit, does not manage to do any good damage. Meanwhile, the Shade behind opens up with his heavy PPC, BAM! Connects with the engine and does several other crits, giving the Lightning something to consider on his way back home. Meanwhile, the other Lightning opens up, hits the Shade multiple times, rips open its aft quarter and sends it into the ground. He was heroic for saving the Shiva to some degree, even though the armor's what saved the Shiva. And meanwhile, the Sadelets opens up on the remaining Lightning, opens up the rear arc of the thing, clips up the wing, damages the avionics, and clips out the engine as well. Again, putting two fighters down in just that one Congo line, while the Word of Blake turned mercenary turned freelance do-gooders have lost only their Shade, which is admittedly a far more expensive fighter. Oh, this was an ugly turn for the TRC as they lost two fighters in the turning exchange trying to take out the Shiva that was trying to protect the Reaver that was getting hammered on by the Chippewa, which it didn't even work out for him. The TRC lost 3 fighters to forced withdrawal this turn alone. We definitely need to give a medal to that Shade pilot, though. He died graciously for a valiant cause. Forced withdrawal calls the Chippewa to start hauling it back, while the Reaver does the same. He's got a lot more initiative ticks to burn through under forced withdrawal, so he's going to keep moving those Lightnings off the field, which had been such a pain in previous games, but I guess karma caught up with him this time, because the Shiva's going to run right up his tailpipe. They've got blood in the air, and they're going to make sure that they get their kills this time. And as the Lightnings limber back home under all kinds of duress, again, we begin sending the harrying fighters after Sadelets starts sinking them in. He begins responding with a saber to try to clear off the aggressors that are most certainly going to kill their harried prey, while we have other interceptors now dutifully limbered by any other problem, begin making a mess. Moving in the directions that they need to, Shade begins pulling back, moving back towards the Saber to do a 2-on-1 engagement, as the Shiva is ill-pressed to take on the lighter Saber, but it can do it if it gets its guns up, and that's just it. We won the initiative. So it's harder for him to get out of the way. Maneuver is everything, but nonetheless, this turn, the Saber managed to swing himself back into the fracas as the Lightnings are under quite a bit of stress to try to get away. And this turn is no different. As the Shiva lights up the guns, it just rips open the Lightning, putting them down, completely destroying them all the way through. I think we cored the thing out. Shiva swings around, he sees his prey, he saw it before, he got tagged by him in the turn before, and now he's going to pay just rewards for that insult, and opens up on the Saber. He doesn't stand a chance. The lighter fighter has some armor, but not enough to hold off against that, even though the Saber pays his due. Again, lights up the Sadelets that was in front of him, putting him in forced withdrawal, I do believe, from several engine hits. But that Saber does not live long enough to see the results of his labor, as he is turned into a sky full of burning confetti by the heavier Shivas. This game got ugly fast, as the poor TRC cannot seem to make themselves available to do anything other than be moving target practice, as the Sadelets, Shivas, and Shades begin just ripping everything up that they can get a bead on. They managed to put a little bit of damage on some of the Muriel fighters, but they just can't seem to make it run home. And now at the beginning of turn 4, it's quite clear that the Tarians are in a complete rout with only one Saber, I do believe, capable of fending off the aggression from Muriel's Fusiliers. The Muriels begin moving back all their units that they have to. Again, several of their units actually have been damaged in the exchange. We have mostly light fighters here, so it's pretty messed up. And speaking of messed up, there's the Reaver. I managed to take it quite off the board. It was a lot of fun. Now you get to see it get re-glued back together. But frustration aside, I am making a mess of the board, and we're just lighting up everything. Saber begins moving away, trying to get into the back arc of something, try to live just a little bit longer. Shiva has nothing of it, finds it under its target reticle, lights it the hell up, again, destroying the poor thing before it has a chance to react. Other Shiva finds his target, destroys it as well, completely making an MVP of itself, as the Shivas got nearly all the kills. I mean, nothing survived. It was awesome! Again, this turn was almost done completely for scenario's sake, because he had to scan some of my units, and I just had to have most of my units survive. And I not only survived, but I completely murdered the TRC Air Force. Now, even though this was short, this game is all about maneuvering and putting in a lot of firepower onto the different units. And it's kind of easy to do, and you can do a lot of damage, even in just passing shots. And as a result, many of the units, even my own, had quite a bit of damage lingering around on them. And they're just not assumed to be okay after the game is in. You still have to make a landing roll, of which a couple of the TRC units got off the board. One of them crashed on the tarmac and managed to just barely not obliterate itself. Meanwhile, the Muriel Fusiliers managed to pull back several of their units. Several of them had excessive landing gear damage. One of the Shivas, despite being noble for his efforts, managed to hit the tarmac and survived, thanks to the prodigious front armor. So did the Reaver, managed to hit the tarmac and just roll down the field, apparently, because it was almost completely filled in. Make no mistake, in the campaign we are actually in dire trouble, but this is an excellent opening, as we have secured the air war against an invading army. But unfortunately, they outnumber us by such a prodigious amount that we're gonna have to face them on the ground. Well, that's been an Ouchies Batrep, and thanks for watching. I really don't think that there's anything I could have done differently on this one, but I don't know. I can point out a lot of problems with his list. He just spent a lot on elite pilots. If he just had a couple other light fighters, a couple Sparrowhawks flying around, I would not have been able to just make a mess of things quite as easily as I did. I would have had to have played a little bit more reservedly and keep the escort fighters a little bit wider in their deployment. And if you want to see the Smack Talk live as the campaign rolls out, it's still ongoing as of this recording, but in the future year of whenever you're watching this video, it might not be. But if you check out the Facebook page below, you can see the Smack Talk as it happens, and you can see how well the Muriel Fusiliers are holding off on Carnot. Spoilers. Also, check out Gamers on Games. They still got a lot of great content. Be sure to give them a watch.